Welcome to the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We discuss topics relevant to developing for the modern web and the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
Hello, wonderful people, and welcome to this week's episode of the Web Platform Podcast, episode 198. I am your host this week, Danny Blue, and with me as always is Eric Isaacson.
Woohoo! Hello, everybody.
Yes, hello, everyone. Apologies again for more intermittent releases than I think we are accustomed to, but getting our personal schedules in under control, we'll say, and plus all of the stuff going on at the moment has other things have taken priority, we will say, but we are happy to be with you here this week. Overall, I think this is probably going to be a bit of a different take on what we usually do. We don't have a guest this week. This is just going to be Eric and I talking, and we want to cover some of the stuff that's going on now, not in any real serious way, but in a how we are doing, what are some things that how some things have changed for us, what some things that we are doing to help kind of maintain sanity and with everything else that's going on, plus some non-dev related stuff as well. But before we do that, we do have a This Week in Web this week. So as we get into our conversation, Eric, why don't you kick us off with This Week in Web in 2 minutes or less?
All right, thanks, Danny. So this week, Web Vitals, a library for checking your performance scores in Lighthouse, was released. So Web Vitals is pretty cool. It helps get FCP, LCP, and bunch of other different target metrics that you'd want. Deno 1.0 is coming pretty soon. There's a great article by, I think, David Else. So it talks about TypeScript and what you should look out for in Deno 1, which is coming very shortly. Quantum Circuit Simulator. So you can actually do a quantum circuit simulator in JavaScript now, which is pretty cool. I was checking that out earlier. And there was this great, I know this is a little later because it's April, dated in April, but there's a great Web Components article I recently saw from webcomponents.dev that shows you how you can take any of the main libraries or different ways, all the different ways that you'd want to create like a modern web component. It was really interesting. And that's it for This Week in Web.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so like I said before, just kind of wanted to check in and talk about, amongst other things, how you doing, Eric?
I'm great. How are you doing, Danny?
I'm doing pretty good. My wife and I have both been working remote for 7 weeks. Yeah. 7 weeks?
I think it's been.
It's hard. It is hard to tell. I feel like it's a very well trodden kind of joke of losing track of time and that kind of stuff, but it's true. Like, I originally anticipated being remote in this fashion for maybe 3 weeks. So once we hit past that point, like today, I had to double check. I was like, today is Thursday, right? If I didn't have my work calendar, I would have no idea what day it was.
It's so true. Yeah, I've been home for about 6 weeks, like I said. The weirdest thing is, as you can tell, you can hear all this background noise, right? So I can, at least. My kids are home. School is remote, so I have to help them with school in between. And so it gets pretty much louder than I'm used to working in. So it's a little crazy. And my wife's been working upstairs on her stuff as well.
So in general, I obviously I'm working remote and that stuff, but so my wife works in events, and so that has been very significantly impacted. Like, she's been really busy with a lot of stuff because there is helping people figure out what to do events need to cancel, planning, because planning for, especially for large events, takes a long time. So things that are going to, coming up in the fall and the winter, even, it's figuring out how those are going to work. There's still, and then plus all this stuff going virtual as well. So figuring out how a bunch of that stuff is going to work.
Yeah, it's been really strange. Like I've talked with a lot of people too who are not used to working remote, and I felt this definitely, but most people have said like, oh well, I'm working even more remotely, and it depends on like what type of job you do, obviously, but
Yeah. So I actually, that's something I actually wanted to brush on is how we are both kind of managing our work and home life. Um, I will say I do not think I've been doing as good of a job with it in the past couple of weeks. I think I started out really strong. Um, and this is also stuff that we, been talking to our teams about because we have some folks that are used to working remote and we've been leaning on a lot of their advice quite a bit. And then folks like me who, like used to working from home, like maybe like a couple days a week or something, but not full time, not like this. So
yeah.
why don't you start? But I say like so how do you start? How do you balance work and home when they are both literally sitting right on top of each other?
I think the same for me. I started off pretty strong, um, making sure that I'm writing everything down and organizing myself, because focus is a problem I've struggled with my whole life. So I've been pretty good with that. Been going back to that, but for a couple weeks there, I feel like I was not getting as much done at work, and that was affecting home as well. So it took more time, but yeah, I think things are going back to me focused, writing stuff down. Not used to working at home all the time, like a couple days a week, maybe, maybe a day a week, but no, not like this. And it was really nice at first, like all right, wow, no people to pull me into meetings and things like that. But I do miss the socialization for sure.
See, so I actually think that's interesting. Is that is not as many. So I have actually found myself, I feel like, in more meetings than usual, and I think part of that is folks starting to. That has actually gotten better, as I feel like as we've gone on, because I feel like people are getting more used to asynchronous communication, right? Like there's like realizing there's an awful lot of stuff that you don't need to know at this second. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't.
Yeah, I think it was more or
and
less ad hoc type of meetings, though.
Yeah. But also, other than that, I've also sometimes, you just have to, if you don't have the bandwidth, you just have to decline stuff sometimes, or say like, all right, can't do it now. We have to move it. Like if we do need to meet, let's move it to a different time. Or
Yeah.
I know with, some of the folks that I do work with, we've moved some meetings to be like, especially like stand-ups and stuff like that. We've moved to be like on Teams, just to be like, hey, all right, we're going to talk about this here very briefly. Everybody add your stuff, like things that people have done in the past, but kind of officiating, like in a bit more standard practice, just to save people time.
Yeah, I think at first we started off having like tons of meetings, right? Like you're saying, the virtual meetings, and then people are doing less meetings now for developers, but leaning more on like tools like Slack to say, okay, we have like this, catch up time. Put your, at the beginning, there's like our team lead will write down like everything in Slack that we talked about, like little notes, and then like halfway through the day, we'll have like a hey, put how much you got done today and what you're working on for the rest of the day type of catch up. And then once a week we all get together on Zoom to talk about just overall stuff, like larger team stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's a bunch of ways that stuff can go, but I feel like a lot of people are starting to settle into a lot. I will say I don't know exactly what this situation was like for you, but not the one thing that I will say I do not miss is my commute. So I do work right around Washington, D.C. So like I don't work in D.C., but I can walk to lunch in D.C. if I wanted to. So the commute, whether it's on the train or driving, is not always ideal, especially because now there's a bunch of track work that was planned. I don't know how that stuff's going, but not having that commute time in the morning and in the evening is really nice. Like that, I think far and away that is the biggest benefit I think I've seen from being fully remote for the time that I am, because it does just leave more time in the morning. Now, I do say, like, I do have to make, so like also like the hour, like my hour or so commute in the morning, maybe not quite an hour, was largely filled with listening to podcasts, reading books, reading articles, that kind of stuff. So I've had to kind of build some of that time back in, that I was like, okay, because otherwise I'll wake up too late, and then I'll wake up too late, veg out on the couch for a little bit, and then go straight into work. But having a little bit of time, it's like, oh, this is going to be my time to have my coffee, pretty much take that time that I was commuting and use it for something, which is nice. Something not work related specifically.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, don't miss the commute that way, but do miss the podcasts and things like that. When you have like over an hour of time one way, you get through a lot of podcasts. You get to do a lot of research and fun things. Unless you're listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, which will take up the whole week, you can get a lot of it done. So I kind of miss the, my podcasts in general. Like, I had some role playing ones I was listening to. Kind of miss those. Haven't had a chance to game with those people, even though we can virtually. We've just been so busy with work.
We actually had a listener reach out on Twitter last week, and I cannot remember the name, and I'm very, very sorry, but I have to look it up. But was asking a similar thing. It's like, all right, so if you're not commuting, when do you listen to podcasts? Like, when do you fit that kind of stuff in?
Yeah.
And a lot of the responses were chores, which is one. So like, I listen to most of my podcasts when I'm washing the dishes, when I'm folding clothes, or when I'm taking the dog for a walk.
Yep.
That's good. And those work, and that actually makes the chores not seem so bad. And it actually acts as a good timer when I'm out with my dog as well, because I can look at because I usually start the podcast right when I leave, and that helps me figure out, like, mostly just to help keep track of time, because sometimes with her, you could be out for an hour and it could feel like 20 minutes, or you could be out for like 20 minutes and it could feel like an hour. So that's one of the things I've done for that in place of this. And obviously anybody listening to the Web Platform Podcast should also take such advice as to not lose out on any of the excellent content we provide.
Yeah. Do you find that, the tasks kind of matter as far as like what podcasts you can listen to? Because there's some podcasts I have to listen to and then, listen back again. And then there's some that like, if I'm like trying to, precisely do something, I need to focus on it rather than listen.
So I will say, I rarely ever listen to a podcast without doing something else.
Okay.
I can rarely do one thing at a time. My wife actually gives me a lot of grief for this. Sometimes, like, I'll be like, I'm the type of person that will be playing like a phone game during the load screens of a video game I'm playing on TV. Right. So like, so I rarely do that. However, there are some podcasts that I do go back and re-listen to. So one of the podcasts I'm listening to now that my friend and coworker Mark Hoffmeyer got me into is something called the Magnus Archives, which is a story-based, like a cosmic horror-ish type show, like radio drama type thing. And the last season of that is going on now. And so so that is one that I will listen. Oftentimes I will listen like when I take the dog for a walk, because they're about 20 minutes. But I will have to listen to it. And then oftentimes I'll have to go back to different parts. But I think I would almost rather do that. Like, I can't just sit and listen to the podcast. Like, I have to do something with my hands. I can read, because if I'm reading a physical book, I am doing something with my hands, right? Because I at least it might seem silly, but I have to. But like, I'm holding it and I can flip the pages, and that's a thing I'm doing.
That's one of the things I think. If I'm reading, I can't really focus on a podcast. I'll have to go back.
Now let's be clear. Yes, I cannot read and listen to podcasts at the same time. If I'm reading, I have to do only that. But again, I'm doing something. But I'm still doing something with my hands at the same time.
True. Okay.
So it's like
That's sense.
audiobooks, right? Like if I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm probably also playing like a game on my phone.
Yeah. How's it been as far as like interactions with people? Are you finding that it's very different online?
So some things are definitely different. But I have like some of my really, really close friends that I've talked about before. So like my a really good buddy of mine and my boss, Aaron Druck, like I'm used to seeing much more often than I do now. But like we've done Zoom happy hours and that kind of stuff, which definitely helps. Like it's far and away better than nothing. Like I say, like I got on, like I taught my mom how to use video chat for so that we could actually see each other, and a lot more work happy hours than usual. A lot of, but like, and it's all good. Like it's nice. Like people drop in, drop out. I actually did a happy hour while I was grilling out on the porch the other day, and we got into a discussion about that stuff. So I'm not even going to say it's like it's something that I almost wouldn't mind if some of these types of things continued past this overall thing. Definitely do miss meeting in person, but I even another friend of mine, we played Tales of Arabian Nights, the board game, over we both had a copy, and he had a camera looking straight down on the board, and we had our board set up to mirror each other, and that is an example of a game that actually works remarkably well because it's a storytelling game. So as long as you have 2 copies of the game, it can work pretty well. That's the only game we've tried. I know, because I'm a big board game fan, so I know we've also talked about doing Max versus Minions, which is at the moment anyway, my favorite board game. Because again, we both have copies, so you can kind of just mirror what's going on and have cameras on stuff. I feel like there's some game. I feel like there are a good number of games that would work, but I think if they got too complicated, like I don't think Gloomhaven would work really well in that fashion. Might, but I haven't tried it. I have seen more and more people doing Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah.
So rather than playing, doing stuff like I'm talking about, like they'll use Tabletop Simulator to play games with people across, and that actually seems pretty cool. I have not tried it, but it looks cool.
I haven't tried it mostly because it seems like first there's only a few games, and then if you want like specific games, you'll have to buy the game like extras or build it yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it's like like at work we've been doing a lot of contests too, like just for fun. And our HR is pretty impressive because they just have every week there's some new spirit type thing where they'll be like, okay, this is the contest for today, or this is the thing that we're gonna try and do, and don't forget to nominate people for Carfax stars. So there's a lot of cool stuff that they're doing to kind of help employees get through all this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been fun with that stuff. But I think interactions as far as like day to day and getting like requirements and things like that, that's been a lot more difficult in some areas because text doesn't translate necessarily as well.
Especially depending on the person.
Yes. And so it's been a challenge. I don't think it's anyone's fault in particular, but it's definitely been different. Like where you have to kind of think about wording things and follow up with people, like because everyone has their own thing that they're doing, and so you're not able to just walk to their desk and be like, "Hey, buddy, come on over, help me out." You have to actually like ping them a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
Depending on who it is, some people get back to you right away, which is great.
Yeah, I know one of the things that like we've had to talk about at times as well is like making sure that like your status in Mattermost is correct.
Yeah, or Slack.
Yeah, whatever the communication platform that you're using is, like So like we even very briefly in the office, we had a physical version of the same thing. I don't think it really caught on, but I thought it was an interesting idea where you could have a little, because of course we have open office plan, all that kind of stuff. But you would have a little sign that you could like put on your monitor. And if it was red, it meant like, I'm working on something, don't bother me. If it was green, it meant, like, yes, like I'm available for you to just drop by. Which again, all that stuff works on remotely, but I know personally, I've not done a great job of this I like won't, so like I'll go have lunch and or something, and I'll forget to put up a status, be like, I'm away from I'm AFK for the next 30 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, we do the same. Make sure that, when you're taking lunch, you change your status to that. If you're away, you make sure that you're away on there.
Especially if you have a team that's across time zones.
Yes, especially. I think we do, but it's not as severe. Like I've worked at places where, it's like 12-hour difference, sometimes more, but yeah, that can be very challenging. Even, before all this.
Yeah. So what about like open source and community stuff? Obviously we're trying to still keep the podcast up, and we're working on doing a better job getting other stuff out. But like, is there anything else that you're taking? I mean, in fact, you've got kids, like you probably don't have. It's like there's some people that are taking an opportunity to be like, I'm going to learn how to do X, Y, or Z, but not everybody has that same opportunity. So like, is there anything, like, do you have any projects? Well, I guess whether it's, programming related or not, any projects that you're working on?
So most of the stuff I've been doing has been internal, unfortunately. Like I've been like trying to work with Brian Cardell on some stuff, because he's been
friend of the show. Friend of the show, Brian Cardell.
Yeah. He works at Galia, I think, or yeah, I think that's the name of it. But basically, he works on web standards and implementing them in the browsers and helping to get that stuff done. And so I was building like a tabs web component, and I was showing him like what I kind of thought would be a way to do this at a like simple way, and then he took that to the whole next level. And he was saying, hey, like we went through this like a while ago, and like these are some good new ideas, and so he took that on, and he's trying to get like get this put into proper HTML, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Not as the way that I had it, but it's kind of cool to kind of work and see how that process goes.
Yeah, I know it can be frustratingly slow sometimes. Not just recently we had an episode where we're talking about with Dave Rupert talking about HTML, and kind of talked about the pace of HTML changes, which isn't that much. And we actually just talked to Brian not that long ago as well.
Yeah.
But that's very cool.
I mean, I don't know like what status is or whatever. He did a nice little blog post about some of the ideas, which was really nice.
Cool. We'll make sure we drop a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah.
I've also been messing around with a lot of web component stuff.
Very cool.
I built a little library. Of course, I built my own framework because I had to. But ultimately, right? Yeah, of course, because I'm a developer. Of course, I had to. This is not the first. It won't be the last. And it's actually something I played around with quite a while ago. But I would kind of took all right, what are the things that I like to do? What are the technologies? Like how do I want the API to look? What technologies do I want to use? What comes out of it? So like I built a little dependency injection framework. I mean, the whole thing's small. It's like 2 kilobytes, and then it's still under 5 kilobytes. I'm using lit HTML with it, so it's still under 5 kilobytes with lit HTML. But I've been like just kind of playing around with it to see how well it works. I've been rebuilding our the web platform website with that. But I actually learned there are a few things that I actually learned about the way that custom elements work specifically that I don't think I was fully aware of until I came up to this. For example, the way that elements upgrade, I didn't fully understand exactly how that worked until recently, and what some of the APIs around it were. But so I'm actually working on a very short. All my blog posts are very, very short, but I'm working on a short blog post there to show it's like, oh, well, here's an example of how you can do certain things the way they can work. And I think it gets called out pretty regularly when you're talking about web components, but I don't think I've seen anything, or I haven't seen a lot that focus specifically around why that's useful. So if anybody doesn't know what I mean, if you've ever, sorry, say again.
That was gonna be my question. So what if people don't know what you mean, Dan?
Yeah. So an interesting part of the custom elements spec is that HTML elements can be upgraded. So, and the easiest way to see how this works is write your markdown in your HTML file, and then define your custom element in a script block at the bottom, and that works. And even if you put it in a script tag and you load it async, and you add the async attribute, it still works. And for a while, I just kind of was like, oh, of course. And there was, but I didn't really think about it. But really, that's pretty cool, because that means that you could deliver an entire page of markdown to the user, server-side rendered or however you want to do it, and incrementally upgrade pieces. Like again, it feels very old school, actually, like the way that you would do jQuery, like jQuery widgets or something back in the day. Except, like we have some nicer APIs and some other things around it. But the fact it's like, okay, here's my page. Here's my, I don't know. I can't think of anything. Here's my user card that, like I say, it's an account profile, ship a bunch of stuff. Here's the user card, which has some interaction with it that I've built as a custom element. But I'm just going to display some placeholder text or something like that, or just some very simple stuff until the JavaScript loads and adds that interaction into it. And the big part that I learned is I did not know that there was an API for listening when elements get upgraded. So if you have the tag name, you can listen for when that HTML element has gone from being an unknown element on your page to having having an implementation applied to it
before it gets registered with the DOM.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. When it's
defined.
Yes, yeah, that's it. When it has been defined. But the other reasons to, and you might think like, well, why would I need to know that? But so depending on how your script is loading, let's say you wanted to grab let's say, again, you had that user card and you had a couple of methods on it, or some way of interacting with it externally. You could grab a reference to it when the DOM loads, but if it hasn't been registered yet, you're just going to get an HTML element. You're not going to get your thing. So it's again, it's just something cool that I didn't really know. And then I started thinking about, like, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense for multi-page apps and things like that, where you do want to deliver, a good chunk of markdown and then kind of sprinkle the web components into it. So that's something that that was something cool that I learned while I was going through this. The project that I'm working on, if anybody wanted to look at it, is called Joist. On my GitHub, it's pretty much, I just copied the Angular API for some stuff, wrote my own dependency injector. Everything's at runtime. I built it to run with TypeScript because I'm using decorators and stuff, but it doesn't really matter. There's no fancy build time stuff, but it's like I said, I would be happy for feedback, but it's mostly just a thing for, I built a thing that I want to use. And so I haven't exactly built it for wide consumption, if that, so.
You mean it's not
fair warning there. You could do with it whatever you like, I guess, but you shouldn't. But no, we'll call it an experimentation more than anything else.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out. Yeah, there's some fun things you can do with when defined on custom elements. I usually use the get method also to check to see if it hasn't been, like, if you load your component in twice, let's say by accident, some stupid thing, right? You can use .get to determine if it's been registered already, which has been really nice.
Yeah. So I actually have a question for you around that, because I ran into some, again, messing around with some of this stuff and trying to build some applications. I ran into some questions as well, and this has gone over on Twitter a number of times, and I think I figured out where I land on this. But let's say that you are distributing a set of web components. Let's say that you're building you're building a Carfax UI library, and you're building it in web components.
The dream.
Do you think that the library is responsible for defining the tag names, or do you think that the end user, being the developer, should be the one to describe it, or do you think it should be an option?
I've gone back and forth with this, because there is an advantage to having just a method that registers this, right? Because then you can have a lot more control from your app as to when this happens, right? So I've gone back and forth a lot, and I kind of feel like, although those are good advantages, I think the component should still be responsible for its own registration. Generally. Okay. There are exceptions. Like, I can definitely see use cases.
Okay.
I don't know.
So,
no, though.
So what I think I've landed on is, because in my own stuff, this all came because I wrote my own router, because, again, of course I did, because I needed to for reasons. Yeah. But I ran into the same, and I had several versions of, okay, should this get registered when you just import the main package? Should I expose a function that lets you register them? Ultimately, what I landed on is registration by default, but exposing the custom element class in case you needed to overwrite it. So for this particular library part, it defines everything in main, which is where the package resolves to, but then everything is available if you wanted to dig deeper and directly grab an element class out. Yeah. So it would take more work for you to do that, right? Because if you had something with a bunch of components, you would have to go find each one and register it yourself, but you could do that.
So yeah, you bring up a good point too. Like, if it's a library of components, then that changes things a little bit. Because if it's a single component, that component should probably register itself. But if it's a library of components, you might have like helper methods initially to kind of say, just load these or just do this.
Yeah.
So I could definitely see that. It's that's definitely a good choice, I think, for that.
Yeah, but I to clarify, this came up when I was thinking about a library versus, let's say, if you were going to build like a single page app or something like that. Yeah. So, for example, the version of the web platform podcast website that I have, each component itself is responsible for registering itself with the DOM. But the router from Joist gives you the option to register stuff. The other reason that I have found, I think that's what I've landed on at the moment for libraries, is it takes some of the stress out of naming stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. So, for example,
other libraries and how they pull it in, like Vue versus Angular versus React or anything.
So those, you mean pulling my components into the other frameworks?
Yeah, like for instance, I created a couple of custom elements in an internal app here. Because you don't have to expose it. I'm pretty much allowed to do that sort of stuff, right? So I made it in Vue, and because Vue wanted to register these components, I had a separate registration file that registered them at a certain point. So like to your point earlier, right? Those aren't separate files. It's part of the application itself. I don't expose it to anything else.
Yeah.
That makes sense? So like, but if I put it in React is going to freak out on other stuff, different things.
Well, yeah, well, that's a different problem.
Yeah. So I did find, looking at that article that I was talking about earlier in This Week in Web, there's a library that was like abandoned, I guess, 6 months ago that you can just take a React component and convert it right into a web component. Just bam, done. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to see that. I don't think there's been commits in 6 months though. So yeah, I don't know how trusted it is.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm still very interested in a lot of this stuff, because in the process of doing this, one of the reasons I started to do it is also I started looking at a bunch of other, we'll say, like web component frameworks or libraries or whatever. And there's a decent number of them out there that are decently popular and have had a lot of thought put into them. There's some, like following various techniques. Some, are something like lit element, which is like, we're going to provide a base class and you expose a render method. There's things like skate.js, which we've talked about before, which is still going strong, where you can use lit HTML, or I think it has some other options as well. Mm-hmm. I can't remember a name. There's a website that lists a bunch of them and actually has a to-do app, and I cannot remember what it's called or where it is, which is terrible of me because I plan on talking about this. Anyway, but so I started looking through a bunch of those. The main reason that I tried to start building this thing on my own is that I wanted to use constructor-based dependency injection, which you cannot do if your base class is an HTML element, because you do not have control over the constructor.
Right. The constructor can't take any parameters.
So you can make it happen, and so you can using proxies and the reflect.construct interesting method. So I've made it work.
And this object that's kind of a mesh of those, right? Like a mix-in.
Yes. So so it's not like a mix-in. But okay. What you do is, instead of the object that you register, right, so when you say custom element.define, you don't pass it. So you have a class that extends HTML element, but you don't pass it that. You pass it a proxy of that, and then you have to do some other stuff to it. But then you get a hook into the constructor. But let's also be clear. You can do this. I do not think you should.
Totally, 100% browser compliant.
So it
really
works.
Way to approach this, though, I have to say.
So I made it work. But I looked at some benchmarks and asked for some opinions. But that is also apparently reflect.construct is fairly slow. I think especially compared to just like document.create element.
I can imagine.
But I was really interested that it worked. But so I abandoned that. So I just like, okay, that's not reasonable. That's a fun experiment, which I should actually, I'll post the source code up somewhere to be able to just to show you that it is possible.
Yeah, I think I'd love to see that, actually. That's pretty cool.
I have it sitting in a branch somewhere, but I'll find it. But ultimately what I ended up doing is the class that you write isn't the custom element. It's a completely separate thing. It's just a class, and you map properties and stuff back to the custom element. And then you just pass it to a function called, in this case, called define element. Right. And it just adds, so it pretty much works like a state manager. Right. So I did not plan on talking about this much, but I have been thinking about it a lot. But so what it does is that so if you inspected the custom element itself, the results of that, or the element instance, right? It's going to have a property called component instance on it, which will be an instance of this class that you just wrote. And there will be an instance of the component injector, which is responsible for creating the component instance, which makes all the dependency injection stuff work. And then what it does is that it maps the properties that you've defined for your component. Like, so if you're using TypeScript with decorators, but you're just like, okay, so these are the property names. And then what it does is that then it just does some property definition stuff on the prototype. And so it only has to do it once. And then it says, and then it just maps the custom element property to your component. And so it treats your component as the source of truth for those properties.
Damn, you shifty man.
Like I said, it works. I'm sure there's a downside to it somewhere, but it does work. But ultimately, that's the way that I started thinking about it, in a way that also potentially an interesting way to start thinking about writing other web component stuff, where the custom element is the custom element is your external facing API, pretty much. You add properties to it, you add attributes to it, but everything else is handled in this other little. Like I said, you can think of it like the state, because it's just another property on your custom element, which means you can safely just, so like when you call custom element.define in the constructor, it's like, okay, create my injector, create my component instance. All my properties are mapped anyway, because they're done on the prototype, not done on the, not done when it boots up. So it only has to do it once. Yeah. And so then it's just, if you set some properties here and you call get from those from your element, you'll get the ones on your prototype or on your component class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to see some of this stuff.
Like I said, I'll show you. We'll set up something later, and I'll walk you through how it works.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. A very, very unique approach from what I can see. But
well, and it's entirely selfish. I wanted to use dependency injection, and I wrote a small dependency injector, which really doesn't take much. I actually wrote a blog post about, if you really want, like, you can write it in like less than 100 lines.
Yeah.
Again, not saying you should use it. I'm just saying you can do it. But yeah, but so I was going to say, but that is the entire reason, is that I wanted access to the constructor. So how do I hack my way around this?
There's a lot of like, flaws in the API, but overall, I think it's great. I was looking through all the ways to make a web component, that article I was talking about. And one of the cool things I saw was they have like bundle size comparison. So like for a single element, like an HTML element, like minified only, the bundle size is like 1.26K on average from what they've seen. And then you get all the way to like Ken.js, which is like 225K for one. And interestingly enough, React, Vue, and Angular are 73K and up. So it's like, it adds a lot on there. And then in addition to single components, they show estimated bundle size of 30 components using the same library. Same thing, minified only. You can look at gzip, Brotli. Like this is, they took like a set of components that they found, across the web to test this.
Yeah.
First, Contentful Paint, which I thought was really interesting, that they're doing metrics for performance testing on here. So definitely, if you're building a library, probably a good idea to read through this, get some ideas.
Yeah. So I know that you can, and so again, and you'll see this all the time, and also before we start getting a bunch of hate mail, you can absolutely build extremely performant applications with these various frameworks. So like I think like base React, right? I think yours is 30 some K gzipped. Angular is more, but similar. It's not too far off. Again, depending what you do. Like with Angular, it's like as soon as you pull in the router and animations and forms and all that kind of stuff, it obviously goes up quite a bit. Same with React. Once you pull in React Router and whatever other libraries that you would like there. Vue, I think, is the smallest out of the box, with about the big three of those three, which I think is around 15. Don't quote me on that though. Look it up. But so you can do it, but it's just like anything else. You have to be cognizant about what it is. You have to be a lot more careful because you've already used up some of your budget. But again, it's fine. Like I
with Vue so far, and I mean, I guess I had really high expectations, but I thought it was okay. It wasn't bad. Like compared to React, I think it's like okay, not apples to apples, but probably the same level. Except React, I have to fight for web components and anything that's not React-y. So that sucks. Like Vue is much more compliant to other things.
Yeah, I like all of them for various reasons. I'm actually still not sold on hooks in React world, which I know is not going to win me any fans, but I'm just not. I'm also not a day-to-day React developer, so take that with an enormous grain of salt. But I do like Vue quite a bit. I mean, I actually don't think there are any frameworks that I fully dislike for any reason.
Yeah.
Like I think Svelte's really cool. I am excited about a lot of the interesting things that React is starting to pull in, like some of the ideas they're trying to push forward. I'm obviously a fan of Angular. Yeah, I can't think of any that I like outright would say, like, no, I would not build an application in this.
Yeah, I think React on its own is great for what it does. Like, I just think like for me, web components are not like I wouldn't want to build an entire application with web components. Like you were saying earlier, build Carfax with web components. Like I used to think everything should be a web component, but then I got over that.
well, so I think the difference is also if you're building a single page app or a multi-page app. And
if it's a small application, sure. Yeah.
Something I'm also starting to look at more is multi-page applications. This is actually some of the stuff I've been doing in, like with a little bit of the time that I've had, because I've been building single page apps for quite a number of years now, like where that is the default.
Yeah, but I mean, I think HTML is good for dumb things, right? Like you can pass it attributes all day long and have it do like UI work. Let it do what it's good at, right? Not managing state as much.
Yeah, but that's the thing. This all leads back into some of the experimenting and playing around I've been doing with upgrading, right? Is okay, how can you, like, if you do deliver a multi-page application, it doesn't even need to be like each view doesn't need to be its own page, right? But like, let's say that you had like a couple, like in my head, right? My thought is if you had, say you had three, right now, like say you had three different views, right? Like let's say you had your homepage, you have homepage, which is one layout. You have your admin stuff, which is another layout, and then you have something else that's another layout. You could deliver Markdown for all of those that completely lays out the page. And if those are done with web components, right, like then you like that, that those interactions and that functionality can get added on top asynchronously as you're working on it. And so you could reveal certain and you can kind of pick where it's like, these are the most important features they need to load first. And then you can have other pieces that are looking like things that are below the fold or something like that, which again, you can do pretty like fairly straightforward. Like, if like using like using intersection observer and like, lit HTML even has this really cool directive called until, where you can pretty much, you pass it a bunch of promises to resolve. Right. And so, and by default, you're like, you look like this by default, but when you load in this element, now I want you to resolve to that inside of the template. So you could do some stuff like that, and that could be done multi-page. The only problem is the router. Like that's one of the big benefits of single page applications is kind of how like routers have gotten really good. Like they used to be awful. They've gotten really good.
I think they're still kind of complex at the internal level. Right?
Routers?
Yeah.
It depends on what you do. The thing that I did find is that there are some really good libraries out there that the only thing they do is parse a URL into parameters. based off of like some regex stuff, which is one of the more that is one to just build a simple router. That is one of the more complicated bits. But yes, they still can't. They are still complicated, but they're good. Like they work.
Yeah.
Like it used to be that you wouldn't really trust them at certain points, and now like I feel like with React Router and Reach Router and Angular's router is very good, and like pretty much any router that exists, you kind of assume it's just going to work, and you'll be able to get your job done.
Yeah.
But that's the thing that I don't know how you would really work with it going between a multi-page and a single page app.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people used to do it with what's it? Is it called a fragment? What's it called? What's that part of the URL called?
Oh, URI. Right.
Yeah. After the hashtag. That because remember there was the old like hashbang method of doing routers.
Hash. It's called hash, like window.location.hash.
Is that just called hash? Okay. All right. Cool. But yeah. So that's the way that it used to be done, but that doesn't work as well. Like I said, I don't know. I haven't figured that part out yet. But I think that would
don't detect a page change at that point, right?
No. So with the history API, there is not a listener for like when there's not a state change listener for the history API. Which I was actually kind of surprised. But you can listen for I think there's on pops. I think when state comes off, but not when state gets added or something like that.
It's been a while since I used the native API.
I don't remember. I would have to look.
We should.
Yeah,
this is making me think though. We should do an episode on building your own library by Danny Blue.
Yeah. Honestly, that might not be. I mean, let us. Like if you're listening, let us know if that's something that you would want us to cover. Like from how do you build it to how do you publish it? Because I know that's not something that everybody's done. Like how do you get something published to NPM? How does node resolution work? Should you publish? How many versions of the library do you need to publish to be consumed by how many tools and all that good stuff?
Yeah. How do you test that?
Yeah. And then Eric, this is also real quick for us. I have a meeting in 9 minutes. So I think we should.
But before we go though, like I know this time is like crazy for everybody.
Yeah.
Probably just kind of go through what we've been doing to keep our sanity. Like you were saying, family life versus, work life, that balance.
Yeah.
What have you been doing outside of work, man?
Outside, I've been reading a good bit. I just finished the last book in the 3-body problem called Death's End. Not exactly an uplifting book, but very, very good. I highly recommend that entire series. We've been doing a lot more training with our dog, which is she's not 2 yet. So she's still got a lot of puppy in her. And so we're still working with her on some of the, some of the things that she needs to work on. She's she's a loud dog. I love her, but she is the loudest dog in the world. Huh?
She a hound mix?
No idea. Maybe. We have a doggy DNA kit, but we never sent it in. What else?
Awesome.
What else have I been doing? So we did buy a Peloton right before all this happened. Or not right before, like day one of quarantine. We had been thinking about it for a while, and we usually do spin classes, my wife and I both. And with this, we're like, well, now seems like as good of a time as any to do this. So that's also a little bit of normalcy, like because we wake up in the morning, we'll both work out, take showers. Like that's kind of a good start to the day. So that's one thing. Yeah. So reading, figuring out a way to keep some sort of normal exercise routine. I went running the other day, which is insane to me.
I miss it. I haven't been fit enough to run in a long time, but it was definitely meditative for me. I really liked it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I feel like there's got to be one more thing. We've both been playing Animal Crossing, which is very fun. I lost my butt in the turnip market last week. So I'm sad about that. Like what is just something else?
You've been playing board games, you said too.
I have been playing board games. That's true. But yeah. Also, the weather got nice, so we've been grilling a lot. So I've been, so a good bit of cooking and that kind of stuff as well. What about you?
I've been trying to go outside when I can. Like even now, I'm working in like our sunroom, so been trying to, just having nature around is nice because being inside for so long, it's like suffocating almost. We've been doing a lot with our puppy, training him too. He's almost 1, so he's a Scooty, I guess, or a Scoodle, which is like but he's like a mini poodle mixed with Scottish Terrier. Forgot what the real term is, but
like puppies are adorable, and again, I love my dog. Dogs under the age of 3 are jerks.
Yeah, they are. They really are. But they're really lovable.
Yes, they are.
That's why they stay alive in the house, I think.
Like every once in a while, it's like our dog is my last quarantine story. I promise.
Go, man.
We were already having a bad day for whatever reason. Wife and I were just not in great moods for.
Yeah.
Like I said, who's to say at this point, right? But I was working upstairs, and then all I hear out of my wife is, "Oh." So I go to the stairs and I go, is everything okay? And she goes, the dog is really dirty. It also, everybody remember, it's been on the East Coast here. It's been raining an enormous amount around DC. I think we've had rain like 12 out of the last 15 days or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
And she had managed to dig a very good Kopi-sized hole in the mud, and she was completely snoot to tail, completely covered in mud, as happy as could be. And thank God she didn't jump on the couch, but you could just trace all of her muddy puppy prints. And the bathroom, after we finished giving her a bath, looked like a war zone. But so that is that's one thing.
In the yard, we actually put up like chicken wire on the fences, so we can just let him go run around and play with him out there, because our dog is like a digger, so he's trying to go under the fence and chase everything. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of artwork too, like not a lot of artwork finished but started. So like I got these new toys for Christmas, which I got late because we want to save some money, so I'm just like I'll get it in like February, which I did, and then it sat there. And it was I got 2 things. I got a Dremel, and I got a hot knife for cutting styrofoam.
Very cool.
So I got like giant blocks of styrofoam that I've been saving for a while, and so I'm trying to carve those and get used to the tool. Nothing is complete, but I used to do I still do, I guess, a lot of Halloween work. So I like to make giant creatures and things like that.
That's very cool.
Like horror and sci-fi. So
that's awesome.
I'm trying to do that. Doing some adult coloring with my wife. We've been watching a lot of TV, obviously a lot of streaming. My kids have been watching The Cosby Show. Obviously reruns. I don't know why. They just wanted to watch it. So it's a good show. So sure, I don't tell them. Bill Cosby himself, but
they'll find out about that later.
Yeah, but it's a good show, so let them watch it. I know you got to get going, Danny.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody, please stay safe. I think things are starting to turn around. More states in the U.S. are starting to allow some work to happen, for better or for worse. So just do what we've been doing, and everyone overseas as well. Wish you well, and try and keep your mind sane. By doing stuff outside of work.
Yeah, I've been signing off calls just by saying stay safe, stay sane, stay inside. But yeah, no, everybody, and if anybody has any other ideas, tips, tricks about ways to help with some of these situations, especially because I think, Eric, I think you and I are both very fortunate. It sounds like we're doing pretty well, but I know not everybody is. So reach out to people if you need to. If you, like I said, if you have if you need mental health assistance, there are ways to do that remotely. There are some services that were built to do it remotely. If it's something that you need to, if it's something that you do decide you need, highly recommend that you do that.
Didn't do it before, so even places that you've looked at and like, oh, they don't do this type of service online, they might be doing it now. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Eric. Well, thank you very much for hanging out with me. I think when we originally started, we were like, oh, we'll keep it till like 20 minutes or something like that. But it's been a while since we talked, so it was great to get a chance. It was great to get a chance to hang out and to talk about a lot of this stuff. So
we haven't seen each other since before all this. So
no, not at all. But yeah, so we're gonna try to keep a schedule. We'll try to get we'll get with more guests. We'll keep, if there's anybody that you would like to see, if there are any topics that you would like us to cover, please reach out. We're always We're always monitoring Twitter, both the web platform account and our personal accounts. Like I said, we are here to provide information to people. So if any feedback that you have is more than welcome. Good or bad.
We really would like to know what you guys want to hear, or who you want to see.
All right, Eric. Well, like I said, thanks very much for hanging out. This has been a slightly different episode of the Web Platform Podcast, and we'll talk to everybody next time.